there we go. All right, here we go. The fire drill is always going on. So just want to say thank you all for having me. It's a really good panel. I did have a chance to sort of listen through the fire alarm, but I appreciate having the opportunity to work with each of the individuals who are on the panel as we do the work to make Wisconsin a much more sustainable state. So I just want to thank Ben and the Electrification Coalition for the invitation. I want to thank the policymakers, the advocacy groups, the nonprofits, and also the corporate partners in attendance today for their commitment to electrifying our transportation sector. Here in the state, we know that the sector is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions for us. This represents 24% of total emissions as far as 2017 data is concerned. And I can imagine it's not much different 4 years later. And we know that electrification is a critical piece to reducing these emissions and addressing the climate crisis as a whole in our state. And we know that we still have a long way to go, but I'm so incredibly proud of the people who are making sure that electrification is a part of the conversation and also doing the hard work to make it a reality here in Wisconsin. Now, the previous administration didn't want to have a whole lot to do with this issue. I'll leave it there. So in our first year, the governor and I took action. We joined the U.S. Climate Alliance. We set new clean energy goals for the state, created the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, you heard from Maria earlier, and also created the Task Force on Climate Change. I'm incredibly proud to have led the work of this task force as the chair because we assembled a diverse and bipartisan coalition that was made up of representatives from businesses, Native communities, environmental organizations, labor groups, farmers, et cetera. And we got to listen to experts. We held public listening sessions, and we had many discussions over the course of a year, which resulted in a final report with 55 recommendations that span 9 different sectors to aggressively combat this crisis. Now, we know that communities of color, low-income communities face the harshest impacts of the climate crisis. So we made sure to center environmental justice in our climate work. And we did this in an unprecedented way. We started our first task force meeting with a training on environmental justice, which was new for a lot of people. We brought voices to the table that haven't necessarily been heard in the past, and we came away with a number of solutions that centered around environmental justice, including many that made it into the state budget proposal, including the creation of the Office of Environmental Justice, creating programs to help lower income energy customers, and also requiring PSC to evaluate the social cost of carbon on our health and our economy, and then the funding to build more climate resilient communities and so much more, including our transportation infrastructure, including public transportation. And on top of these initiatives, we also proposed many critical investments on climate action, including the creation of a chief resilience officer, the funding to doubling the utility contribution to the Focus on Energy program, which will add an additional $100 million for energy efficiency incentives. And then the money to provide $70 billion in Knowles Nelson stewardship funding over the next 10 years, the investment in green jobs, and building on the administration's work over the past 2 years related to clean drinking water, and offering comprehensive proposals to ensure that everybody in the state has clean water. But as it specifically relates to transportation and EV-related budget investments, we included several important provisions in electric vehicle infrastructure, as well as other investments to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. This includes the allocation of $10 million of the remaining Volkswagen settlement funds to reestablish an EV charging station grant program at the Department of Administration, investing the remaining funds in replacing vehicles in our state fleet with clean energy vehicles, and then providing $5 million in bonding to build electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and then requirements for complete streets when we're building certain roadways and communities, and then eminent domain authority for municipalities to purchase land for the construction of non-motorized paths. And finally, $1 million in each year for the Transportation Alternatives Program. And we propose this funding in order to pave the way for electrification in our state. As I said before, we got a long way to go, but this is just a start, an important start. And as we move in this direction, whether it's mass transit or infrastructure for individual EV customers, we got to make sure we're doing this in an equitable way so that we don't leave people behind. And if EVs are only accessible to higher income individuals or the infrastructure only exists in certain communities, we won't be able to comprehensively reduce our emissions. And so with the investments in our budget that make up the most ambitious climate agenda in our state's history, we're going to need some help. We know that we need to make these investments in order for us to turn the corner on the multiple crises that we continue to face. We need your support to make this happen. And we proposed our budget. Now it's in the hands of the Budget Writing Committee, the Joint Committee on Finance, and it will soon go to the whole legislature. And unfortunately, JFC has already taken action to remove some of these items. But it's not too late because the legislature as a whole can put some of these things back in. And that's why we need to build a groundswell of support from the public to get these initiatives, these ideas turned into reality. So if you're able to, please be involved and engage in the state budget process and demand that climate action and investments in EV infrastructure are the reality here in the state. Ask that of your lawmakers. Demand that they do more to protect our communities, because we know that it'll take all of us to make these proposals and this vision the reality for Wisconsin, but I have complete faith that it's possible. So I just want to thank you all again for your hard work. I want to thank you all for your advocacy around electrification, and I cannot wait until we're able to do these events in person, and hopefully it'll be a place without a fire alarm going on, and we'll be able to run things a little bit more smoothly. But until that point, I just want to say thank you all for having me. Really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your flexibility, sticking with it. Gave everyone, I think, some really good ideas. And just really appreciate your leadership. Great to see that the state is, in the words of a previous panelist, kind of catching up and hopefully leapfrogging into some new areas. And just curious what your thoughts are on kind of the Midwest moving forward altogether. How are you looking at that opportunity?
So in terms of the Midwest, I think that I look just to Southwest and Iowa, and their investment and the share of the electricity they get generated from wind energy, is encouraging to me. And they've done this with the Republican-controlled legislature, and they've done this with the Republican governor as well. So there's not a political reason why this shouldn't be the case in Wisconsin, or why we shouldn't be making significant strides in that direction. It just definitely gives me hope that more is possible. And I've been talking to the Lieutenant Governor in Iowa, where we usually sit together at the Lieutenant Governor Association's meeting. Probably because we're just a lot younger than everybody else. But I've been saying that you got to come up here to Wisconsin and let them know what's up, man, and kind of preach the gospel for us.
Excellent. All right, that sounds great. Thank you again. Really appreciate it. We're gonna go ahead and move.